Thank you all for spending your time with us this morning. We have a session that we've worked quite hard to have a lot of content in here because we work with a lot of finance teams, a lot of CFOs, and this webinar really brings together the challenges they are all facing. Your host today, myself, my name's Adair Jury. I am the sales director here at FUJIFILM Microchannel, and also joining me is Hugo Badenhorst, who is a solution architect here and specializes in the Sage Intacct application. And today we will be using Sage Intacct as an example of how we meet many of the challenges and how we resolve many of the challenges of CFOs and finance teams today. Just so everyone knows, today's session is being recorded. So the reason for that is so we can send this to you after the session. Also, the question and answers is available. Please feel free, if you have questions, to put your questions in the Q&A. We may be able to get to them during the meeting, but definitely we will afterwards if we don't during the webinar. In front of you now are the 4 major challenges that we resolve for our customers. And each one of these challenges, we're going to drill down on each of them, go through some of the details of them, and then address them by, many times we'll show you demonstrations, in this case of Sage Intacct. We'll actually demonstrate Sage Intacct resolving those. Otherwise, we'll explain on the other ones how we do that. We're going to start with consolidation and period close speed, which is probably the #1 challenge that we resolve here at Microchannel. Now, today we're going to do something a little bit different, whereby we're creating sample companies from our customers. And in the case of consolidation and period close speed, we have created a company called Summit Bridge Financial. Now, Summit Bridge Financial is a typical customer of ours, whereby they're in the financial service industry, is that mid-size of around 200 employees. And the structure is 7 legal entities, and many of our customers have legal entities. This legal entity, we have got a quote from their CFO. And the quote is, at Summerbridge, month-end close takes more than 10 days. The team juggles intercompany reconciliations across the 7 entities, with errors creeping in despite manual checks. Bank reconciliations alone consume over an hour each day. The team is capable, but they are constantly pulled into rework instead of strategy. That statement is definitely obviously one that's been made up, but there are many aspects of what the customers that we deal with, that's where they start. And the #1 challenge that we deal with is what we call multi-entity madness. And whether our customers come from, a lot of our customers do come from the MYOBs and the QuickBooks, sometimes they're coming from on-premise systems. But the root cause for this multi-entity madness is typically that the data of each company, so every entity, the data of every entity is siloed from each other. It could still be in the same database, but it's a different data set, or it could, at worst, it can be sitting in different databases. And that enables, it totally stops automation between the companies. And we typically see people having to do eliminations via Excel. So please, let me pass over to Hugo here to show how this multi-entity madness would be solved by Sage Intacct.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. And just a couple of things on there, and thanks everyone for joining. Looking at Intacct, you've got a few things that we can do out the box there. Now, firstly, we can set up multiple entities within the application, and we can do that across multiple currencies and tax jurisdictions as well. Now, within Intacct, as Ade mentioned, it is a one database solution, really. And when I drop down there, you can see we've got multiple entities that I've got access to within the application. Now, that gives you a couple of benefits. When we start looking at master data, you're looking at, your chart of accounts, any of the dimensions that we'll use on the reporting perspective. All of that is created once, and it's available across all these entities. So that top level gives us that benefit of creating everything only once, and we've got that ability to go across. Now, when you think about transacting across multiple entities, that automation across the different entities will also be quite beneficial. Looking at one example here, I've done a journal entry, and just across some of those entities that I've got there, the inter-entity transactions is automated. So that intercompany loan between them, you can actually bring through, and you'll see for each of those locations, there's a due to and due from entry that's created automatically. So, just assisting you with the process there. With some of the master data, think about customer suppliers. Yes, it is one record across the organization, so all the entities got access to it. But in this case, on my AP side, I want to restrict the customer with a supplier in this instance to say this is not available for all of my companies. And using the functionality there, I can actually go through and select, this is only available for my Australia entity, for instance. And I can also put in cost centers if we need to do that. So that restriction is still available, even though we maintain one set of master records. I think that's the sort of first stop there.
Awesome.
Just to automate that. Thanks, Ade.
No, thank you. And having the functionality there that you can set up those processes, obviously, if your organization has multi-entities and you don't have the ability to set that up, you're obviously going to have multi-entity madness. The second we call consolidation chaos, and it really does flow from that root cause of the multi-entity madness, whereby, again, if your GLs are siloed, if they're not sitting all on the one master general ledger, you typically end up having manual consolidation. And a lot of our customers that we take from that pain are using Excel. So again, Hugo, please go back to Intact and how this is done.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. Now, a couple of things on this side, when we start looking at, we've got 7 international entities, we're juggling currency conversion throughout our consolidation. There's minority interest eliminations, all of that's generally done manually outside of Intact. In this instance, when we utilize Intact, all of that becomes, part of the solution. So in my example, I've set up a tiered consolidation level, and you can see, first tier, I've got the holding company and, some partial ownership across a few entities and full ownership across others. And then even on there, that multi-tier going down and, showcasing the ability to showcase or bring in that minority interest as well. So when we look at the consolidation process within the application, it automates all of that processes. So each of these entities has got different currencies as we saw initially. So it takes care of that, multi-currency conversion. It takes care of that partial ownership. It takes care of auto eliminations between these entities, the loan accounts that we saw earlier. So generally, when we look at that structure, and I'm going to consolidate this, you can start that process. And the big advantage there, you can see what will basically happen. So from the bottom up, you can see there, there's all the entities with their percentage ownership, with their currencies as well, and rolling up into a particular currency. For this, going up to the higher level again, each of them going up, and ultimately in this instance, we're reporting in US dollars. We can see what the ownership percentage is. We can look at our ending spot rate, for our balance sheet accounts, and our weighted average for our P&L accounts when we do the consolidation. Now, once that's completed, you've got that ability to report on that. So, within a single view on one of our dashboards, you can see there's all my companies going across. Part of this will also include our elimination entity. So any of those intercompany loans that we've done between the entities will now be eliminated within that entity.
Thank you, Hugo. And having seen many of the Excel spreadsheets that I've seen from our customers doing consolidation, that is obviously a massive way forward from a productivity perspective for them. The third major challenge around that consolidation and period close speed is taking that level down. Whether you have multiple entities or you're just the one entity, this bank reconciliation burnout challenge is something that we see a lot. There are 2 major causes. Sometimes the solutions that we look at don't have that automatic data entry, so they don't have bank feeds, which is something that Intact obviously does have. But also it's around that manual matching, ticking and bashing of bank reconciliations. Many applications don't have a smart, big bank reconciliation engine with the ability to tailor rules, which is something that Sage Intact has. Passing over to Hugo to show that.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. So looking at that, within Intact, we've got a couple of options there to set up some automated rules. And within the rules, we decide what that matching looks like. So once we get the bank feed in or import a bank statement, we can actually process that through, look at the transaction and match things automatically that exist on both sides. The other great feature would be, looking at other options there's creation rules as well. Now with the creation rule, a transaction that's in your bank that's not within your application yet will be created automatically based on a template that we set up in the background. So that's the sort of first aspect. Other features coming in as well, when you've got direct deposits from a customer coming into your account, that can be picked up and automatically matched against transactions. So you can see there's a receive a payment from a bank transactions. You'll see what it is. It's against a particular customer. So we've got assignment rules. And if I actually preview this, you'll see they will apply that to a particular invoice. So the system's got the ability to go in and suggest where to apply the details and to which invoices as well. When we look at the recon itself, there's a couple of things in there, but essentially we're looking and comparing, things that's unmatched on the Intact side and things that's unmatched on the bank side, and we can do things automatically after that. For the things that we'll be able to match, there's some options there that you can see. So my checks and debits were matched automatically. So things that were on the bank side and also on the Intact side matched based on the rules. So we've got those details coming in.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Hugo. And so when we looked at that, the major challenge of that period close speed, these are the typical areas and the typical problems that we have solved for our customers. And a lot of the time that is with Sage Intacct. So we had that as our number one challenge, right? Because I think the majority of our customers, that's what we close. That's what we're resolving for them. Number two is around real-time visibility, around making sure organizations can see what they need to see about their organization from both a strategic and an operational level. So instead of having a multi-entity scenario, we thought to think about an organization that is selling software as a service that, again, mid-size, but typically issues come even further if there's multiple revenue streams, right? It's just not the one sort of revenue. Revenue might be coming from different areas. So we think this is, from our experience, this sort of organization, typically, we've resolved that real-time visibility problem. And in this case, our CFO of Cloud Nova, a software as a service invoicing company, gave us this quote: "I can't make confident calls when reporting is always 2 or 3 days behind, a typical issue. Our revenue data lives in a billing platform and costs sit in our ERP, and every forecast involves merging Excel files from different locations. We're a digital business, but finance is still so manual. We need to move from reactive to real time, or we will miss opportunities." And we do see that a lot with our customers, right? They're not seeing their full business operations, and they can't make those strategic decisions, but also some of their operational teams, like their sales teams and their customer service teams, they've got what we call this challenge, blind spots in reporting. And the number one cause of that is that all their business data is not natively centralized. Okay, it's all coming from different sources, and therefore, no matter what reporting tool you're using, you're not able to see that data. But as well as not being able to see the right data, not having the right formats for the roles and the reports and the dashboards that you need for a role. So, Hugo, please show us what Sage Intacct does to help in this blind spot challenge.
Yeah, within Intact, we've got a couple of options there. One of these, Adair mentioned their role-based dashboard, so that's one of the key features. We've got a number of out-the-box role-based dashboards that can be utilized to visualize things on a dashboard, bring reports in, bring KPIs in, and those are things that you can own and manage. Now, essentially looking at some of our dimensional objects that we use to slice and dice the data on our dashboards, there's one, a revenue trend by dimension, by project. So in this instance, I've got quarterly revenue going across, and you can see going down, different aspects as to how we measure the revenue, and each time, just portraying, what we've achieved for that. So looking at our operating locations, we're looking at service lines, different industries, different projects or items that we've got there, and project managers. So for these type of organizations, you always have the ability to look at your data in different formats and utilize our dimension structures to slice and dice. And this one, just taking dimensions to the next level, where we actually look at things where there's what we call almost dimensions of dimensions to get into the additional details that's required there. Now, some of our other options there, looking at a dashboard for the CFO, again, company performance that we can see the revenue for services, total revenue. You can see, on these scorecards, a number of things that we can compare and showcase on a dashboard. And again, like I mentioned, these are things that you can own and manage, you can change when we start the process on this one.
Yeah. Thanks, Hugo. And I'm hoping when people look at this, obviously we don't have your business data inside this demonstration system, but even in that quick view of Intact, you can see all the different ways that data can be provided to a CFO, to a finance team, and obviously wider than the finance team as well. But making sure that that's being presented, takes away those blind spots. What you need to see, having access to the data and being provided in the right formats for the purpose of that insights is very important, and Intact does that very well. Taking that step down, we call the next challenge that we see a lot cash flow guesswork. But in many ways, cash flow is a sample, because what we find is that the right report or the right way for that data to be shown is siloed from where that data is. So in this case, from a cash flow perspective, we often see the insights being given to a finance team inside Excel. And once it's inside Excel, you're creating straight away siloed data. Either the data siloed already when you started looking at the insights, but once you start looking at the insights inside Excel, it is definitely siloed and it's not real time. So a real key of any good ERP system that the finance team uses is making sure that the insights that you're seeing is tied to live data. And cash flow forecasting is definitely a great example of this. So yeah, please, Hugo, you're obviously keen, jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. So looking at some of this, I've used one of our marketplace solutions here called Martis, and a couple of things just to set the scene there. When we start the process, from an account perspective, we can specify on the accounts, so on your P&L accounts, what that amortization would look like from a cash flow perspective. So generally, when we have a budget that we produce, we can say what the budget impact is on a monthly basis, but the impact on cash flow is either on month 1 or month 2, or it's spread across the year. Depending on that solution, we basically specify what that looks like. So, you can see there everything, insurance, it's a prepaid expense. We want that in month 1. So that full cash flow impact is in that first month. Now, by doing that, when we populate our budget, we will basically be able to showcase what that balance sheet impact would look like as to where each of those impacts will come through. So because that's related to accounts receivable or accounts payable, we can see for each month how that cash flow is impacted and what that result is. Now, with the details that we get from there, we can then accurately do a cash flow statement or projected cash flow as to, bringing in what our results are, what the impact is on APAR, on the balance sheet, where that comes in, and then ultimately what's the end period or the end balance of our cash flow at that one. So there's a few options. Obviously, there's a normal cash flow statement that we can produce as well, but I thought just taking this forecast option from a budgeting perspective and pulling that through into an actual cash flow forecast gives you a bit of an idea of what is capable within the application as well.
Yeah. And yeah, look, thank you, Hugo. That automates and is so much more powerful. And again, what the majority of our customers are coming from. Now, in terms of real-time visibility, we're focused on reporting a fair bit here, but another part of it's not just reporting and real-time visibility. The data that you're looking at, the data that your users are working with, also needs to be real-time to get, to come away from, I guess the challenge we see a lot is that everything's spreadsheet based. Okay. One of the ones we see a lot is around job costing or project costing, with the root cause being that the data that your team's working with are manually updated and there's no integration with the actuals. Now, Sage Intacct comes from a finance best of breed philosophy whereby it was originally created by accountants for accountants. So it sees itself as being a best of breed financials tool. It is expanded out of that to also encapsulate other operational areas. And so the operational areas that Intacct can handle as standard such as project costing we highlight, but we'll talk a bit more later about the operational systems. If you have an operational system that isn't able to be handled by Intact, there is an integration platform that again makes sure that everything that you're using is in real time or near real time. But let's just start here with an area that we see a lot with our customers, and obviously in the particular Cloud Nova solutions that we have here, which is around project costing. Show us, I guess, Hugo, how the project costing with real-time tracking works in Intact.
Yeah, so bringing that back still again on the reporting side, there's a number of options through different projects and different ways of handling projects. But in this case, there's revenue-based projects that we're doing as well. So we're actually billing it out to a customer. But in most aspects, we are able to actually set up a project, and within the management, bringing in actual cost against the project, bringing in timesheets against that. So there's a few aspects that we use to populate the project information that we want to bring in. Now, looking at the details that we get out of it at the end of the day, you can see what we've built so far, what our revenue is per project. So in this instance, I've had a few in there. Hours worked. So looking at the actual hours that we've populated, we've put in through timesheets, what that contributes to our labor cost, other expenses that we bring into play to be able to bring through a GP and a margin percentage at the end as well. So giving that flexibility of reporting based on a project level. Now, that's revenue-based costing. If it is just a capital work in progress or any capital works that you're doing, software implementation, anything like that, we also have the ability to bring through WIP relief. So part of this, because we assign everything to a project, we can then get to a point where we say, we've completed the project, our software implementation is complete, we want to capitalize all of the expense that we've incurred so far. So everything we're processed into a particular work in progress account, so we can actually bring that in. And once we run the WIP, you can decide on a particular project or group of projects at a point in time to actually release that into, a fixed asset or into inventory items. So those type of things we can actually, what we call, do WIP relief and automate the process where you don't have to actually move the entire project costs to a different area in the application. It is automated, and then we can actually trigger off, if it's an asset, capitalize the asset. If it's inventory, put it into stock, and we can actually start utilizing that aspect of the project. So a few things that we utilize there within the application to showcase projects, attribute cost, revenue, everything to that particular project code that we'll use for reporting and additional functions that we drive from there as well.
No, thank you, Hugo. And yeah, it's a very strong area of Intact around both the job and project costing, but also that revenue recognition, WIP recognition, that control in real time, definitely a strength. So that summarized the areas that we see mostly in our customers around that, that real-time visibility challenge that in this case, Intact is very, very strong at resolving for CFOs and finance teams. Moving to the next area, which is process risk and control. And many people think about process risk and control being an issue when your organization is growing, and that is true. But also, if you don't deal with this challenge, you also can't move quickly in terms of what are the opportunities might be in your particular area. So for this particular area of challenge, we've created a company called Stratos Consulting Group. And it's a professional services company, as you would imagine, again, mid-sized company, but a project-based consulting firm with complex billing and complex costing. But their issue is around really that control, right? And risk, as you'll see here. So their CFO, Tim, says, no, we caught a $95,000 duplicate payment too late. Since then, I've personally had to review every high-value invoice. That's not a scalable solution. Our approvals are buried in inboxes, project costing is scattered across spreadsheets, and risk is increasing with every new client we take on. Controls shouldn't slow us down. They should give us confidence to move faster. And absolutely. So the first challenge that we're going to touch on here is possibly my favorite for the alliteration, which is fat fingers and fraud. Okay, so at the end of the day, it's about things not being accurate, whether it be by, yes, it's a manual entry. Many times, data has to be typed in by people at some point, so there's manual entry, or there's weak approvals, weak threshold controls, things like that. So this will always be a risk, a control risk, and how well your process can handle it are very important to you being able to be an agile company and a growing company. Again, Intact and a good ERP system should have solutions inside the application to handle that. And one of the strong things is around outlier detection inside Intact, as well as things like audit trails and role-based approvals. But Hugo, please give us a feel of that inside Intact.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, just looking at that role-based approvals and what we can achieve there. So from an AP perspective, all around automation, and we'll touch on that in the next one. But from an approval point of view, we can set up some approval rules looking at invoices coming into the system manually or automated. And this is a rule set based on cost center dimension. So, depending on the cost center, where the transaction should go for on an approval point of view. We've got a default rule in there, but basically on a cost center level, we can see that on strategic consulting, Emma can approve anything up to $3,000, and then Catherine needs to approve that. And then on one of our others, Mike can do it up to 5,000, and then Emma can do it. Construction is Nathan, installation commission is Emma. So each of those areas, different areas of operation from our cost center perspective, we define what the delegation of authority is and what that approval structure would look like within the application. So that's the one area, it brings that approval into the system, keeps it away from external options that we've got there. Now, our other option, looking at that outlier detection, like they mentioned there, initially, there's a couple of things on our journal side, either when we enter this, depending on the configuration that we do, or on the approval stage, and you can see on this side, the system will actually warn you that there's outliers and just need to take a look at that. So firstly, if we verify that first one, it will tell us, a couple of things about the transaction. So there's unusual historic matches. And then if we look at the line level, you can see the coding is different. So, the account is unusual. So it identifies and recognizes the transaction that we captured in the system, but it tells me that the account that I used is unusual. So just verify that we've used the correct account there. So just a quick way to either inform the user capturing the transaction or the approver to look at that. And all of these are there to improve your month-end close process, to ensure that, the information is there, it's relevant, it's quickly visible. On the other one, you can see, again, there's unusual matches. And in this instance, the amount was unusual. So, again, we've done the same transaction before multiple times. So that machine learning has picked up, it's identified the things in there. And it can also identify any growth or changes in your organization. So, there's new things that's happening. Where do we take that? What do we need to do with that? Now, on a compliance side, from an audit perspective, there's a couple of things. So you'll always be able to see who created, modified the transaction, when it was done. But on the audit trail, we can also see, it was created, it was spent within budget, so spending within region. So you can see it actually updates that, so you can see where it is. When the transaction was approved, there was a modification done, when it was submitted again, and making sure that everything's compliant. So bringing that audit trail in to make sure that from a transaction point of view or master data point of view, it is audited, it's checked and controlled to ensure that we stay relevant and compliant.
Yeah. Thanks, Hugo. I mean, it really is, if you look at it, having the controls so that before an important transaction is posted or before something is paid, having the controls, those thresholds, the delegations of authorities, separation of duties, making sure that's there to start with. And then if something does get through, again, having the ability to detect any of those things like outlier detections or audit trails. So again, and in the coming in, the going out, just making sure that you're reducing the risk in your business as much as possible and keeping the control in there. Now, as mentioned before, there is always going to typically be somewhere where manual entry occurs, but as much as possible, we want to take away from manual entry, allow automation, allow artificial intelligence to do what it can do. And one of the obvious areas is around accounts payable automation, where many times human error comes into the process. But not only human error, having email approval sitting in areas where you can't track things, you should be able to take that away. If your business is going to grow and reduce its risk and be strategically look at where your business is going, these things need to be automated. So a great example here, Hugo, please show us that automated AP routing inside Intact.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's quite a key strength, looking at the AI and what comes into the application as well, is automated transactions. So, you've got your AP invoices coming in via email, or, we've got paper invoices that we scan and we want to upload. So these things we can bring into Intact, and you see I've ended up in my automated transaction area, and there's a few that came in. You'll be able to see, I've uploaded a few. There's a couple or one or two that came in via email. You can see if there's any import exceptions. So immediately the system will identify if there's duplications on an invoice received twice from the same supplier, for instance, or if there's other issues to resolve on a particular transaction, and you'll be able to visualize that. So it'll bring through the transaction. You can also see that the attachments there, whenever you look at any of these, from a processing point of view, they'll be able to view the details of the transaction and the actual invoice side by side to go through and see where things were coded and how it comes in. So that ability, once we've verified that, send it into the approval workflow, it will step through that delegation of authority that you saw earlier and get into the manager's approval for review. So I've already opened that approval side of things. So there's my approve invoices. So anything that I need to approve will sit there. And again, from a manager point of view, they can see, who the supplier was, what the document number is, the date, transaction currency, if that's relevant, the amount, and also what the status of that transaction is. So it came in, one of these were partially approved. So I know it went, past someone else's authority. So I know it's probably a high value transaction, and it went over that $5,000 mark that I had on that particular one. So, visibility key, and then the automation behind that, where we bring things in, is quite an interesting one. Part of this is also utilizing some of our overview, or some of our guidelines on how to process within the application. So we can see, our typical workflows in the system is also utilized there. If you create new suppliers, easy way to visually go into the supplier or the approval of those, the invoices that came in via email, OCR'd and created automatically in the system. What does that look like? It goes through the approval side, and the same on the payment side. We can ultimately approve that. So those workflows, the approvals, the automation of getting the transactions created for you, all within native Intact then at the end of the day.
Yeah. Thank you, Hugo. So it's really control what you can control, automate what you can automate, alert and notify people in a productive manner, making sure you have the audit trails if something happens, make sure you have outlier detection just to make sure everything is working well. So that is a strength of any system that's going to be able to reduce that risk as an organization moves, is agile, and gets big. To extend upon that, take away the manual entry, take away those areas where risk can slip in, where your controls can fall down. Disconnected systems is a huge thing. So many of our customers we see have what we sometimes call a swivel chair integration, right? One person getting data and from one system to another. Okay. As mentioned a little bit earlier, Intact comes from a best of breed philosophy whereby make sure the financial foundation of the system and the organization is strong, but then also make sure if it can't be handled by standard functionality, make sure that there is a strong integration framework. There are users of Intact that are retailers, for example. This does not have point of sale functionality, but we have a lot of retailers using this system. And because we can use that strong integration framework as well there. So probably people on this call will have operational systems that we will not try and bring into the ERP, but we will make sure we take away this challenge of disconnected systems so we can control what is happening, and we can, again, remove risk from your organization. So I know Hugo's got a few examples of some of the integrations that we do a lot of, but there'll be lots of integrations on the call today that we would do for you with this AP integration framework. But take us through a couple, Hugo.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. Now, generally, when you think about integration through the API, a lot of those, as Ade mentioned, could be bespoke. So it is something that doesn't exist. I've chosen two that's sort of two of our marketplace solutions, one being Salesforce. So it's got an out-of-the-box integration with Intact. So, looking at that configuration, it physically gives you the ability to set up that mapping, any transactions that or not any transactions, but, customer master data, a sales order, a sales invoice that we generate from the sales Salesforce platform, we can then map and identify, this particular field in Salesforce needs to update this field on the Intact side. So that integration is there, we can set up. So that's one of our marketplace solutions. The other one, from a payroll perspective, quite a popular one, when we look at Employment Hero, it's again got out of the box integration to Intact. So if you've got an Employment Hero subscription running your payroll, that can straight away come into Intact as part of your subscription. There's no additional cost there. And things to note there, looking at the chart of accounts, that will populate the chart of accounts across into Employment Hero, the tax details, and then looking at your dimensions, your locations, department, classes, all of those dimensions going across into Employment Hero. So you can set up effectively the mapping as to where that needs to go when we process that. So when you do that pay run, and we finalize the pay period, in a sense, weekly, monthly, that journal will basically create a journal within Intact. If there's a modification, you can edit that pay run. It can go and update that journal as well. If for whatever reason we need to delete that, it can also delete that payment journal. So it keeps the payroll system and your ERP financial system in sync to ensure that there's nothing missed. The payroll data is processed immediately, so that real-time visibility is there as soon as things happen as well.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Hugo. Great examples there, how we get rid of that disconnected system challenge that is a limit on a lot of things, including risk control, but increasing, stopping organizations from growing. So that process risk and control is a challenge that has been very important to our hundreds of customers who have moved onto our cloud systems. One thing that extends from that's been a theme throughout today has just been scaling with confidence. So many times the underlying challenge is, how do we scale with confidence? Because it's very apparent to a CFO that their existing systems are stopping them scaling. So we've created a Altura Capital Management, again, very similar to many of our customers. This customer is a private investment company. They're a multi-entity fund manager, between 40 and 60 employees, and their challenge is that scaling with confidence. A typical quote that we hear from these sorts of customers of ours is that we've doubled our assets under management, but finance still operates like we're a 10-person firm. Now, our month end takes 10 or more days, and budgeting feels like a heroic exercise in Excel wrangling. I can't keep asking my team to push harder. We need smarter systems that can scale with the business. Now, thank you, Jeleni Lee, for that comment. It is a typical comment from organizations that we deal with. And look, the performance slowing with growth is a challenge that many customers have, but there's sometimes a number of reasons for it. One, it can simply be the system that they're using is reliant upon on-premise IT resources, and either technology's past it, they're non-compliant with the latest technologies, or they have to replace all their on-premise IT because it's so old and it's under-resourced. So there's many times it is simply a hardware issue, but a lot of times it's really a technology issue with the system that they're coming from. Simply can't handle the thousands or tens of thousands or millions of transactions that a company is scaling into, or there are manual processes, and as the company gets larger, these processes are taking longer and longer to do. An example of those sometimes comes from customizations that were done in the past, and now not a relevant customization. The customization has stopped the agility in the business, can't change it, and again, that's preventing growth. So the typical ways that an ERP system, a finance system like Sage Intacct handles this, is by end-to-end automation with best-of-breed functionality, and fundamentally by exploiting cloud computing. So please take us through how Intacct does this, Hugo.
Yeah, so looking at what we've got there, obviously Intacct was born in the cloud 1999, and annually they would actually review all their tenants, running on the application. Now, generally, when you subscribe to a SaaS model, software as a service, they will handle, the environment, the hardware in the background. So that's not something for you to ever be concerned about again. But part of this, they do an annual audit looking at, what are the top tenants? What do we actually achieve when we look at our cloud computing? Look at the top tenants there. Total transactions booked, 2.28 billion transactions. So you can see, just the volume that's gone through some of these tenants that we've got there. They also look at, the customer and vendor master data, how many records are created, quite a few million there. Revenue recognition schedules. So those are quite an important one each month, that there's revenue recognition that needs to be calculated and created. So quite a few invoices generated from that particular instance. And then transactional data, 895 gigabytes. So, again, scalable to grow with you as an organization. Your cloud infrastructure will grow automatically as part of that process. They will manage it, they will monitor it, and will let you know, where we need to scale or what we need to do to grow with confidence, essentially.
Yeah, thank you, Hugo. And look, some of those figures are amazing. I'm always quite amazed by this term. A cloud vendor like Sage will know where your system is slowing down before you do, right? They've got telemetry on that, and they make sure that their resources are scalable with that. So look, that's definitely a discussion around that cloud computing, the power of the cloud in scaling with confidence. The other area I mentioned before is around making sure that you don't have manual processes. You have best in breed processes to do things. And one of the areas we see a lot when companies grow, when companies have creating more departments, start opening up in different locations, start opening up different companies, diversify their business, all of a sudden budgeting is one area that just stops the business growing with confidence. So we thought just to touch on that, because we see a lot of budgeting where it's all Excel-based templates. These templates are being emailed through each other. But moving to something that's best of breed, that's collaborative, got version control, is an example of Sage Intacct delivering so that organizations can scale with confidence. So Hugo, please just touch on this particular example.
Yeah, thanks, Ade. Now, looking at this one, I've chosen Martys, again, one of our marketplace partner solutions that integrates fully with Intacct. Now, it takes away that guesswork in your budgeting process. It's an online tool, again, defined by, we can set up the location, the cost center as an example. So, this particular budget both across those two individual ones. So you create these workbooks that you distribute to the team responsible, and they're responsible and can manage their budget accordingly. So on this side, give them the ability to enter budgets. They can look at, travel there, for instance, look at the last year's actual or last year budget figures and compare that. Giving them the ability to go in and seamlessly just enter values in there, like spreadsheet based accounting. You can do that, but it also have the ability to put in options where we can actually calculate what it is that we look like. So we can put in monthly figures, weekly, bi-weekly, annual. So we can bring those in, we can adjust amount, we can actually copy existing values as well. So looking at last year's values, that's always a good one to start. I'm going to look at last year's actuals, what we achieved. I want to increase this with 5% for this particular one. So if I preview that, it gives me the value that we achieved last year. With an update, if I save that, that actually updates the budget line for you. So, a number of tools to automate and assist the process of budgeting, and it brings through the collaboration side of things as well. You've got team members contributing to the budget process, they're putting in their values, and then ultimately submitting that through for approval before it's finalized and comes into the application as an approved budget. There's a few more aspects to this to automate a number of things, but I think just from a starting point of view, the idea there, we've got the budget worksheets, we can actually jump in and collaborate around that process as well.
Yeah, no, look, thank you. It is a great example of best of breed functionality required by organizations that are growing, that have that confidence to grow. So look, thank you. We've now drilled down in all of these 4 areas that in some way our customers, sometimes they focus on one area more than the other. Now, if you're watching this webinar, now I'm very confident that some of those would have resonated with you, but obviously the data and the actual scenarios we've given you isn't 100% your scenarios, which really takes us on to the next step, whereby we would love to spend the time with you to understand your challenges, what your financial challenges are. And we typically call that something like a requirements discovery meeting. We'll spend half an hour with you, understanding your business more. And then we can do a session like this, obviously a tailored session or one-on-one session, and we can take you through and show you where Sage Intacct, or maybe one of our other systems, but Sage Intacct is one of our largest growing customer bases here at Microchannel, and then take you through a tailored demonstration of how we would look at addressing your specific challenges. So please feel free to reach out to me and to go to that next step. In terms of our next steps from here, look, we will be sending you out an email with a link, hopefully tomorrow, to this webinar so you can replay it with some information in there. We would love feedback. You'll notice one of our CFOs, Jeleni's, on this call. She will give you a call just to get your feedback, just to see, one, how can we do these sorts of sessions better? And two, did it resonate with you, and can we take you to a next step by understanding your business more? Otherwise, we hope you gathered a lot of information and this was of great value to you. Thank you for your time, and hopefully we'll be talking to you soon. Have a wonderful day.